Canada has obtained a 1 month reprieve from US President Donald Trump's tariff last night after promising to invest $200 million in fighting organized crimes and drug. Additional pleasures to appoint a fentanyl czar and designate drug cartels as terrorists. But in the days and the hours before that phone call between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump, Canadians were faced with a truly terrifying reality that our leaders are entirely unfit and unserious to handle a crisis of this magnitude. Joining me today to discuss is Canadian YouTuber Viva Frei, who has fled to Florida. I'm Rachel Parker. Welcome back to The Rachel Parker Show. Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Parker. Welcome back to The Rachel Parker Show. We are going to be joined by Canadian YouTuber Viva Frei. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his content online to break down what went on in the days and hours leading up to yesterday's announcement that we were going to see a 1 month delay in those tariffs. So as you guys know, we were expected to see 25% tariffs coming into effect today. That has been delayed by about a month. And for the energy industry here in Alberta, those tariffs were actually reduced to 15%, which is, or sorry, rather 10%, a 15% reduction for the tariffs that we were going to be seeing in other industries. So we're going to dive into all that today. Viva, I want to start by asking you right off the hop, you know, Trudeau had this phone call with Donald Trump. He committed to investing $200 million. You know, what took him so long? He ended up investing the money anyways. He ended up getting that 1 month delay. Why do you think he waited until basically the last possible second to make this investment and delay those tariffs?
I mean, the short answer is he's an idiot, but he's an idiot with a big ego who thinks that he is more valuable than he is as a leader. And he thinks that in order to feign his own value as a leader, he can hide behind what he claims and rightly believes is the value of Canada, but overstating or at least over-negotiating the power of Canada versus the United States, hiding behind that to try to make himself look like the savior. Oh, I'm the holier than thou out here defending Canada's good reputation with America. The reality is, he acknowledged the problem. This is the reality. He acknowledged the problem a month ago, 2 months ago, when he said, we've got to tighten up the border issue. He acknowledged the problem of rampant immigration fraud or immigration issues in Canada when he said we've got to tighten down on these student visas because 5% of these students are not showing up for classes. You got terrorists crossing over the border into the US from Canada. So he acknowledges the problem and then pretends that it's not a problem in order to negotiate on a false pretext with someone who is a much bigger stick in the negotiation discussions. So he's just, overall, he's an idiot. He needs to manufacture scandals so that he can have scandals to manage while he's prorogued Parliament, so that he can somehow create a problem that he can then resolve and then say, look at me, I'm a great leader. I negotiated with big bad Donald Trump.
So you're saying, he's essentially positioning himself and positioning the Liberal Party to gain favor with Canadians during their leadership race and ahead of a general election with this crisis.
He's definitely jockeying that way. And what better way to have a crisis to manage than to manufacture other problems out of this negotiation strategy? When you have Chrystia Freeland come out and talk about imposing a 100% tariff on Teslas in a country that's supposed to be going green, that's not doing, that's cutting down on domestic energy production, penalizing the green energy alternative. I mean, it's like the government's tactic, or at least bad government's tactic, is hurry up and do something, even if that something is tremendously stupid, tremendously counterproductive. But that's it. They create a problem, and then they think that they've solved the problem that they've created, and now they get to campaign off. Look what we've done. We've solved the problem. Oh, what's that? We have an EV shortage down in Canada. Oh, well, we'll go buy it from China, even if those cars tend to burst into flames. But we've solved the problem that we've created, which was the result of another problem that we've created in the first place, which is rampant immigration problems in Canada that is posing a national security threat for America. And Trump knows it. He's not stupid.
So when Trudeau announces this investment in protecting the border, I mean, on my part, I see it as an acknowledgement that he is, he's sort of being forced to acknowledge that the federal government, the Trudeau Liberals, they've made a lot of mistakes on the border and Canadians are not feeling safe. Noticeably, our southern neighbors are noticing the issues here on our border. But you're saying he's actually positioned himself really well to make it seem like he's solving a crisis when in fact he was the one who created this problem to begin with.
he created it, he acknowledged it publicly, and then when Trump says, well, fix the problem or we're going to impose tariffs, he comes out holier than thou, high and mighty, says, how dare you impose tariffs? We're, the US's biggest trading partner. We are equal at a table when we're not, and people have to acknowledge that and be able to negotiate from that position. And so it's an implausible position that he takes, which contradicts a position he took barely 2 months ago. The main argument is that it's America's border to protect. So if you happen to have terrorists crossing in at an 8-to-1 ratio from Canada to the US than from Mexico to the US, despite the fact that the amount of illegals crossing is greatly disproportionately higher in the Mexican side, you've got a problem. And Trudeau acknowledged that problem, where I don't know what percentage of Canada is now born outside of Canada, where you have millions upon millions of temporary student visas that are being given to these students coming from adversarial countries, and many of them are defaulting on their visas and not showing up to classes. And then you have if it's 8-to-1, 6-to-1, whatever, a disproportionate amount of people on terror watch lists being intercepted crossing into Canada, into the US. People are going to say it's America's border to protect. They're in control of it. Yeah. It's Canada's problem that is creating a national security threat for America. And so Trump will deal with it the way he thinks he's going to deal with it. Tighten up your border, have some increased surveillance on your end of it, and don't create a problem for us to manage. That's not what we're here for. That's not what good brothers do. And so what did Trudeau do? I mean, he did what he should have done from the first second, which is, yes, we have a problem. Yes, it's the result of bad policy, but that would have meant acknowledging further his bad policy and conceding on it. But he ends up doing what he needed to do from the beginning, what he was always going to do from the beginning, except now it's only a 1-month reprieve. And so in a month time, they might actually have to start renegotiating some of their trade agreements with America, which might have been Trump's end goal all along. But congratulations, you took the bait and you played right into it. So you got a 1-month reprieve to fix the problem. And then we're going to have some further discussions.
That leads into what I wanted to ask you about next, which is, the actual reason that Trump had this threat of tariffs that we still see hanging over Canada for another month. Now, basically everyone has a different opinion as to what Trump is doing here. Some people say it is pretty clear cut. Canada does have big issues with their immigration. Canada has too many terrorists in it. The Americans are seeing that, and they want Canada to tighten up its border and its security, as you said. But I also think that there's another side to the argument here, which is that Donald Trump wants to return jobs to America. He wants to bring manufacturing back to America. And so I think with something like, auto manufacturing, we see these parts in the vehicles going back and forth from Canada to the United States. Well, with tariffs, that becomes very difficult. We saw initial reports saying that the cost of some vehicles would increase by $3,000 if these tariffs went into effect. So to me, I think that this is a bit to sort of return manufacturing jobs to America. And now you're saying it looks like Trump might want to, renegotiate some of the trade deal that the Americans have with Canada. So what do you think is one of his end goals here? Is it to bring back manufacturing jobs and other types of energy jobs to the States, or is it just to get a different trade deal with Canada?
I mean, it's going to be a combination of all of it. Whether people think he's evil or whatever, Trump is not dumb. And if anybody still thinks he's dumb, they haven't watched his 3-hour interview or his 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan. He's not dumb. He's actually quite strategic, and he's actually quite intelligent. He might be a bit of a bully, but you might also have to learn how to negotiate with someone who you think is a bully, because punching them is not going to work. Whether or not he wants to bring manufacturing back to America. He wants to not be reliant on foreign countries. He wants to stop being exploited as well by foreign countries. And he's America's president. He's not Canada's president. He's not there to do any favors. And so when he comes in and says, fix up your border, stop it with the fentanyl, stop it with the smuggling of drugs, or we'll impose a tariff. The smart thing to do, if you think it's pretextual, which I think people are right to think it is, the smart thing to do is not to play into it. And so, okay, fine, no problem. You're right. What's the big deal? Let's do this. And then you don't give him the pretext to say, you didn't do it fast enough. Now we're going to renegotiate some of our free trade agreements, which free trade might be more beneficial for you than for us. And we're a little bit fed up with Canada, riding the coattails of America in all respects, economy, defense. It's exactly like what he did in Europe with, I'm going to block now, not NAFTA, but, the European, the NATO, sorry, NATO. It's like, you guys have been taking advantage for a long time. I'm going to use this as a negotiation tactic, mess around, and then we'll have further discussions about that which you're dependent on more so than us. So undoubtedly, there might be some trade agreements that he wants to revisit, wants to renegotiate. that he negotiated them back in the day, too bad, times change. But if it was pretextual, congratulations, you played right into it. And that goes for Justin, that goes for Jagmeet, and that unfortunately also goes for Pierre Poilievre, who really royally screwed up what was an easy thing to exploit for his own political profit while nurturing a relationship with, the president, and he might be the next prime minister, probably will be. He's screwed up sort of wooing that relationship early on.
I want to get to a little bit about some of the Canadian leaders' response, but first I have to ask you, because obviously you're in Florida right now. Over the weekend when it said, was announced that tariffs were coming, and in the circles that I was in, it was all anybody could talk about. Like, people who never talk about economics, people who never talk about politics were freaking out about it. Everyone was talking about it. And I was like, is this what Americans are doing? Like, are Americans as like freaking out about these tariffs as it was in Canada? Because it felt like all anybody could talk about over the weekend.
It was all anybody could talk about, but the tenor of the discussion over, south of the border was much different than north of the border. South of the border, the sentiment is, you couldn't go to the big, X accounts. The sentiment was, we don't need your stuff, Canada. You need ours. We don't need your defense. In fact, quite clearly, your defense is just creating liabilities for us, but you need ours. The sentiment up in Canada is, this will cripple us. The sentiment up in Canada is, and Pierre Poilievre puts out a great 7-minute video highlighting the weaknesses of the Canadian economy, how, it's true, Canada should be doing more interprovincial business. But the problem is, you don't generate wealth by trading money internally. All you do there is actually give your cut to the government. The way you generate wealth is by bringing in wealth and business from abroad. But the bottom line, it will be much harder on Canada than it will on the U.S. The U.S. should be more independent. The U.S. should bring back manufacturing, whether or not it increases the price of goods. When they talked about the Colombian tariff, and then the idiots like AOC and all of the other Democrat morons out there, like, well, now we're going to pay more for coffee. Well, first of all, there's alternatives. It's not like there's only one brand out there. There are alternatives, and even if you end up paying more for a specific product, when the jobs are being created to make that product domestically, people are going to have more money to spend in the first place. So it's a bit of the push and pull, and a little bit of the pain at the beginning when prices go up, but then so do wages, and so people become more employed, and you become independent and not exploited by foreign countries like Canada, and not left to the mercy of adversarial countries like China and India. So bringing back the manufacturing has some short-term costs, but it has some long-term gains. But true, Canada is much more vulnerable to a tariff war than America is, which is why having idiots like Chrystia Freeland talking tough when they won't suffer any of these consequences, it's very nice. They use the everyday Canadian as the fodder and the victim of their terrible policy, but they get to feign strength that they don't actually have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've told us about the American response. I want to show you guys a little bit of the Canadian response. We saw some videos of Canadians at sports games over the weekend booing the American national anthem, which is something that I haven't seen before. And I was actually maybe I was mistaken, or maybe just naive, but I was actually quite surprised to see this. So take a look at this clip, you guys.
Rachel, if I may ask, you look young. How old are you?
I'm 27.
Yeah, so you are maybe too young to remember. It's not the first time Canadians have booed the national anthem of the American national anthem at sporting events. I'm 45. I remember it. It happens periodically. It's typically a knee-jerk reaction to policy, the Iraq War back in the early 2000s. So it's nothing new. It's just it's stupidity, because it's an ultimate. They do it only because they feel it to be the ultimate act of disrespect. But A, it's juvenile, and B, it's counterproductive. But more to the point, look, part of the Canadian identity, and people might not like this and call me whatever names you want, but I'm from Quebec, where it's even more true than out west. Part of Canadian identity has always been defined as being not American. Canadians have the quintessential stereotypes they hold the stereotypes of Americans. Brash, rude, ill-informed, and whatever. Not that all Canadians are any better, but that is the stereotype. It's the international stereotype. So Canadians have always sort of defined themselves as being not American, as though that's a a feature, a selling point. So it's nothing new, but it's disappointing. It's juvenile, and they don't understand that Trump is not there to rectify or remedy their own failed government. And if there's anyone to boo, it's not the Canadian national anthem. It's Justin Trudeau. It's Chrystia Freeland. It's Jagmeet Singh. And to a lesser degree, but nonetheless, it's Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very misguided to me because, as you said, it should be Donald Trump's interest to prioritize America. I mean, that's what his slogan was: America first, make America great again. We know that these are things that are important to him. Why should we be angry at another president for prioritizing his country? I'm actually angry at our political leaders for not prioritizing Canada and for succeeding at getting good deals for Canada for a very long time. So let's kind of look at some of the responses throughout the country in various provinces over the weekend. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, I think, is probably looking the silliest of everyone. We have a clip of him making some of his announcements that he's eating now. We'll go ahead and you guys can hear exactly what he had to say about what he plans to do to fight back against the Americans.
Tomorrow, President Trump's tariffs against Canada go into effect, and I'm just so disappointed in him. We need to maximize our points of leverage and use them for maximum impact. Tomorrow, the LCBO, which sells nearly $1 billion worth of American beer, wine, spirits, and seltzers every year, will remove all U.S. products from its shelves and wholesale catalog. Starting today and until U.S. tariffs are removed, Ontario is banning American companies from provincial contracts. They only have President Trump to blame. We've gone one step further. We'll be ripping up our contract with Elon Musk's Starlink. Ontario won't do business with people hell-bent on destroying our economy.
Yeah, this is where he announces that they're like, I don't want to make fun of the gentleman behind Ford, because I don't know who they are. But this looks like a dodgeball team of the incompetent. Like you got Doug Ford. I don't know what the jerseys are about, but I'm presuming he's celebrating something good. When I talk about stupid, and like in battle, sometimes in arguments, you sometimes say things that you can't take back after the argument is over. This argument is over because Canada buckled. I should say buckled. They caved. They did what they needed to do. They should have done from the beginning. They did it a day or two too late. When Doug Ford comes out and says, yeah, not only are we going to impose tariffs, whatever, we're going to ban Starlink from operating in Ontario. I mean, first of all, you don't get to take that back after the fact and say, oh, sorry, I was just negotiating. Ha ha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Elon. Who the hell does Doug Ford think he's punishing? Is he punishing Starlink and Elon Musk, by denying it the market of Northern Ontario? No. Doug Ford, I've been using the word idiot a lot. He's ill-informed and short-sighted, I should say, is only penalizing people living in rural areas of Ontario that need Starlink to get the internet. So congratulations. Oh, what do we? Well, we'll find an alternative. We'll go to China. We'll ask Huawei for a few more towers up north. And some might say that looks like it was the end goal all along. It's not Trump trying to renegotiate NAFTA. It looks like it's Canada trying to cozy up to China, which creates an even greater national security threat for America. But it's bottom line. It's stupid negotiation. And now that the deal is sort of done and Trudeau has recognized a problem, what does Doug Ford do? Walk that back? Sorry, Elon. No harm, no foul.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Doug Ford, he said he wanted to cancel that contract with Starlink. I believe he said that decision is now on pause amid the tariffs. Meanwhile, there's 15,000 rural Ontario homes that are waiting for internet that just, I guess, have to continue waiting. And I have to ask, Doug Ford came out with this big, strong show saying, we're not going to be doing business with American companies. No more American contracts are allowed here in the province. Like, it feels a little bit like communism to me. I think that should be the decision of the business owners to decide for themselves. And, even the not having purchased for American alcohol, like American alcohol is taken on the shelves. Like, Ontarians and Canadians can decide on their own how they want to respond to this stuff. If they don't want to buy American anymore, I mean, okay, fair enough, but it does feel a little bit misguided. And so it was a very childish response. But I have to ask, we saw Chrystia Freeland also target Tesla. Sure, they're saying that they want to target and punish American companies. But do you think that what they're actually looking to do is to punish Elon Musk because he is a part of the Trump administration?
There's no question, but they are such a bunch of filthy hypocrites that they say they love the environment, but they hate Donald Trump more. And so how are we going to show our love for the environment and green energy? We're going to impose 100% tariff on Teslas? I mean, the amazing thing is you apply this mutatis mutandis to the COVID response, to the Russian sanctions, taking Russian vodka off the shelves of Canadian liquor stores. I mean, it's how you brainwash the masses, and that's all that they're trying to do. But it is just, it's a government. I would say they're not trying to just penalize America. It's like they're trying to rationalize and justify their continued ongoing relationship with China. And when you appreciate the amount of business that China, the Chinese Communist Party, is doing in Canada, buying up minerals, buying up energy sources, having their towers there, despite the security concerns. And what does the Canadian government decide to do? Pick a fight with its most reliable trade partner, its geographic neighbor, and one that provides its own national security. Some might say it's almost by design. But if you were trying to do it and make it look like they're trying to make it look like it's Trump's fault, you do nothing different. But no, they want to go green. They want to cripple the West in terms of energy production. And then they want to impose a 100% tariff on Teslas, which sort of limits the possibilities of what type of electric vehicles they're going to be able to bring in and what trade partners are going to benefit from that decision to boycott America.
Mind you, wasn't it just like a few years ago that people who bought Teslas were eligible for like a massive $20,000 rebate? I
think it was like, I don't know what it was because but it was like 8,000. I thought it was 8,000, but it was several $1,000 rebate because they wanted to promote green energy. But it's just, if it doesn't cause you to look at Chrystia Freeland and understand that she's an ideological traitor, but also something of an ideological terrorist in terms of, you agree with me or we will actually destroy the earth in response to disagreeing over politics. That's what she's doing. That's what she's saying. And we will ally ourselves further with the Chinese Communist Party because Trump is even worse than the Chinese communists. I mean, once you understand it, you'll understand what type of government we're dealing with. And I've been giving Pierre Poilievre a bit of a hard time because he needs to be better in terms of dealing with this and not playing along to the same game. But I think he does it because he looks at the Canadian public and says, this seems to be what they're digesting. So I'll give them a little bit. And then I'll give a little bit back in terms of the politics to Justin Trudeau. But it's pervasive throughout the Canadian government. And Pierre and the Conservatives, or the so-called capital C Conservatives, have to have their feet held to the fire a little bit to not just play along with this game, which is descending further into the hole, but just slower than with Chrystia Freeland destroying Canada for the benefit of Ukraine and Justin Trudeau destroying Canada for the benefit of China.
So you've mentioned Pierre Poilievre a few times now. You've taken issue with the way that he responded to the threat of tariffs. Can you explain a little bit, what did you think that he did wrong? What would you rather have seen him do?
I put out a tweet and I said all he had to do was say, we will diligently work with the Trump administration to secure our border, period. And it would be politically and ideologically consistent because he's been complaining about Trudeau's immigration policies. He's been complaining about the fentanyl crisis in Canada. He's been complaining about the illegal drug trade in Canada and the decriminalizing of drugs in Canada. So he's complaining about a problem that he then turns around and says Trump is unjustified imposing these tariffs. It's politically inconsistent. In fact, all he would have had to have done was nothing. Would have been better than what he did do. But all he had to do from a political savvy point was to say, we will diligently work with the Trump administration to protect the border and to prevent the flow of fentanyl into America. The American argument to that, or at least the counter argument to that, is very little fentanyl actually crosses the border from Canada into America compared to from the South into America. They say it's like 1%. Whatever. It's 1% too much. And you don't have to tolerate any. So all Pierre had to say was, we'll work diligently with the Trump campaign and Justin Trudeau, end this proroguing of Parliament, get back into this business so that we can fix this. And then some people call it suck up. Other people just say strategically aligns with Trump and uses it as a political cudgel against the Liberal administration and the NDP. But, he tried to please both sides. And in doing so, I think he piss off everybody. He's like, oh, this is an unjustified and unjustifiable tariff. No, it's not. And if you think it is, play politics a little different. And then he puts out a 7-minute video showing how lamentable the Canadian economy is, how stupid Canadian internal policy is, which ironically enough shows how devastating a tariff war with America would be for the Canadian economy and the Canadian people.
In contrast to Pierre Poilievre, who, admittedly did seem to have a bit of an unforced error there. He's usually quite slow and measured in his response. He did take a while to respond. And when he did, I think what he said surprised a lot of us. Now, in contrast to that, we have here in Alberta, our Premier Danielle Smith, who I know a lot of Conservatives have felt very favorably towards the way that she's handled this response. She's gone on to Mar-a-Lago. She went to the inauguration. She moved up some spending that they had planned to secure the border to show Trump that she's willing to work with him. And over the weekend, when every other premier was panicking about tariffs and trying to, retaliate against the Americans, she was pretty quiet. She said that she was disappointed in them, but you didn't see her freaking out and making these sort of panic decisions. I feel like she came out the winner in this. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. In fact, some are hypothesizing that the only reason it took Trump, or that it was delayed this long to impose the tariffs or to make the threat of tariffs, was because of Danielle Smith's politicking. I don't always agree with her, and there's some stuff that I've needled her on Twitter for. It was objectively the proper response. And to say that you're disappointed is not necessarily a jab at Trump. Sometimes you're just disappointed that things need to be done because of the state, the current state of affairs. So the disappointment is not necessarily in Trump's decision, but rather the fact that Trump needs to make that decision, or at least that he's claiming that he needs to make that decision. So it was the only proper response. It was arguably the reason why the threat of tariffs came a little bit delayed since Trump took office. But I mean, he's only been in office for 2 weeks now, and it's a different world. Her response was clearly the right response, because she's not interested in creating crises to manage. Doug Ford, it's the easiest distraction from your current failed policy to create further devastation that you need to manage. The reality is that Ontario and the Canadian economy as a whole is in dire straits. There are so many things in Canada that are broken now politically that the easiest way to ignore them is to create another crisis to manage, so that you don't have to look at the healthcare system, so that you don't have to look at medical assistance in dying now being like top 5 killers in Canada, so that you no longer have to look at the fact that you've got millions upon millions of student visas who are defaulting on them, not going to leave the country voluntarily, and that you've got political turmoil pretty much in every big city, rising crime in every big city. So manufacture a trade war with Trump so that you don't have to manage or address any of these government-created problems.
Well, it's a very astute point, and you'd have to say, looking at it, I would say that manufacturing this crisis is working, because as I've said, it seems to be the only thing people are talking about. I know people who are not interested in politics at all, they are even discussing it. And now, because the threat of tariffs is still hanging over us, it looks like we're going to be talking about it for at least another month. Viva, thank you so much for insight today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, that was Viva Frei, Canadian YouTuber. That is all we have time for today. I'll be back with more content tomorrow, but let me know what you guys would like to hear about. As I said, we've been covering tariffs a lot. We'll probably do a few more shows on them, but you guys might need a reprieve from discussing this and want to hear about something else. So let me know in the comment section below. We'll be sure to take a look at those and consider your ideas. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.